From first appearances, this road, linking the old coaching town of Stony Stratford to the railway town of Wolverton in Buckinghamshire, looks just like any other busy urban road. Step back 100 years, and the picture was very different. For along it travelled Britain's most famous and longest surviving enterprise in steam motive street transport. Locally, they simply and affectionately called it our tram. Our story really begins in 1838, when Robert Stephenson brought to Wolverton the railway. It was the railway that transformed Wolverton from a village into a town. Its impact changed the face of North Bucks and of ordinary people. Overnight, the area which had remained undeveloped since the days of the Middle Ages was awakened into a new age by the coming of steam. Wolverton soon became more than a halfway house on the Iron Road, where engines were changed or repaired and passengers refreshed. McConnell, the locomotive designer and engineer, moved to Wolverton. It was not long before his engines ruled the Euston to Birmingham line. They were said to be the fastest and most powerful engines in the country. The railway dominated the area, providing jobs by the thousands for generation after generation in this tightly knit community. The company built houses, schools, a market hall, public houses, a hotel and sports field. It even catered for the community's spiritual needs. In 1877, the locomotive department at Wolverton closed, but the works continued to expand and build carriages and wagons for the ever-developing railway network. As the railway developed, so Stony Stratford's stagecoach and wagon trade declined. To make good the loss, nearly every widow offered lodgings to the railway workers, and the town soon became a dormitory suburb of Wolverton. Back in Wolverton, other changes were afoot. McCorquodale's, the printers, opened their new envelope works on a site adjoining the railway works. Men and women in their hundreds would daily converge on Wolverton from Stony Stratford and the surrounding villages. So it's not surprising that in 1882, an enterprising group of Stratford businessmen put forward a proposal to link the two towns by means of a light railway. In November that year, the Wolverton and Stony Stratford Tramways Company Limited was formed. But by September the following year, the company was in voluntary liquidation. It was soon revived as the Wolverton and Stony Stratford District Tramways Company Limited. But again, nothing happened. Then, in 1886, Charles Herbert Wilkinson, a local contractor, took the project over. He issued a prospectus for the sale of shares and started to build the 2.5 miles of tramway. He, too, retitled the company, this time as the Wolverton and Stony Stratford District Light Railways Company Limited, which must rank high in the league of long titles for short lines. Although the tramway order specified that the line would be of 4 foot 8.5 inches gauge, it was finally constructed at 3 foot 6 inches in 100-pound metals laid between granite sets. The route started from near the cattle pens at Wolverton Station. A turning triangle was positioned at the junction of the Wolverton, Stantonbury and Havisham roads. From here, the single line followed the centre of the road, round past the station booking office, to a double-line passing place by the entrance to the station master's house. Further on, over the original main line and past the market hall, a siding was constructed down Leadsom Street to the LNWR goods depot. A second passing place was positioned at the end of Cambridge and Windsor Streets, and from there the line passed the McCorquodale envelope works into the country section. In Stony Stratford, the tramway company built their main depot, which consisted of a car shed, engine house, fitting shops, goods department, stores and a coke bunker. Many of these buildings still remain today. Close to the junction with the London Road and opposite the Foresters' Arms, the line again split into a double track. It was here, on the ground floor of the British School, that the company rented a small room which became the office and waiting room. Round the junction and into the London Road, the line headed north as far as the Barley Mow public house. 4 German-built locomotives were ordered from Krauss & Company of Munich. These were of a standard design used by many European steam tramways. The Midland Carriage and Wagon Company of Shrewsbury supplied the rolling stock, which comprised 5 large double-deck cars. 3 seated 100 passengers, 1 seated 80, and another 50. A small single-deck open-sided car seating 20 was also purchased. Coke and coal trucks, as well as goods wagons and parcel vans, complemented the stock. With a large team of navvies, Wilkinson succeeded in completing the line in 9 months, and by May 1887 it was ready for General Hutchinson of the Board of Trade to certify it safe for use. On the Friday prior to Whitsuntide, driver Swain and second driver Coleman prepared one engine and car for the inaugural journey. Large crowds lined the route. With a twang-twang from the clapper bell, the tram pulled away from the Stratford booking office and headed to Wolverton. The tram was here at last. Pulling the heavy 100-seater cars soon took its toll on the engines, and within months 2 had to be withdrawn. Thomas Green and Son of Leeds supplied the replacements. Sometimes the engines even pulled 3 cars at a time. With nearly 250,000 passengers a year, the venture looked very promising, and it wasn't long before Wilkinson extended the line a further 2 miles. The extension took the line northwards from Stony Stratford across the River Ouse to Old Stratford. There, at the junction with the Deanshanger Road, he built another tram depot. The line continued on the left-hand side of the road to Deanshanger, the home of E&H Roberts, the agricultural implement manufacturer. Wilkinson optimistically believed there to be sufficient goods traffic from the foundry to justify the investment. Passenger traffic on the new extension was initially very popular, especially on Sundays when the journey took the place of an evening walk. The fare from Deanshanger to Wolverton was 4d. But the novelty soon wore off. The goods traffic decreased, and the only sound revenue came from carrying 300 workmen twice a day. So Wilkinson turned his attentions to the ambitious project of connecting Newport Pagnell to Olney by means of another light railway. Today there are still a few overgrown reminders of this ill-fated project, which stopped here at Emberton, just half a mile short of its destination. Over £36,000 had been spent on the line, and although a separate company to the Wolverton, Stratford and Deanshanger line, both folded around 1890. In 1891, Herbert Samuel Lyon, the Liberal MP for North Bucks, and Bletchley's most dominant, most lovable and most criticised citizen, came on the scene. With considerable public spirit, he headed a syndicate that reopened the line. Managed by Edward Braggins, this fine body of men worked the trams and helped the company prosper. Probably the most popular conductor was Billy.
He was very short, very tubby, and got uniform on and a peaked cap, and he really looked the part.
And he was a real character, little tubby fellow, and he was very proud of his engines. He'd have his oil can and he'd go around oiling the wheels and all the parts, and no child dare go near those coaches or engines while he was about to do anything to them.
You can't think of one without the other. I mean, the tram was Little Billy, or Little Billy was the tram, that was it, you hear.
For once, the company was profitable. It even replaced one of the remaining Krauss engines with a loco purchased from the Brush Electrical Company's Falcon Works in Loughborough. Enamel signs and advertisements now adorned the tram cars. For the workmen, the 15-minute ride, travelling at 8 miles an hour, became a necessity. For the children, it was a delight.
I was at the school at the top of the town, which is now the Plough Public House. That's where I started school. And of course the playground was outside near where the tram was. And I'd spend all my playtime standing at the railings watching the tram, getting up steam and little Billy Newton oiling it up. And those little trams fascinated children. They were so unusual, the steam coming out, and they were mechanical, you see. Anything mechanical, naturally, children like to watch.
And of course, as boys, we loved that tram. We loved the smell of the engine, for one thing. And then, of course, Little Billy, the conductor, everybody knew him. And we always tried to pull his leg a bit, but he scored every time. If we pulled his leg, he got a good one back.
As children, if we ever got the chance for a ride on the tram, we used to be very excited about it.
At the turn of the century, our tram had outlived nearly every steam tram enterprise in the country, and for the wrong reason. Electricity was now the driving force behind over 1,000 miles of Britain's most successful tramways. A willingness to go on thinking in old ways and a disinclination to keep pace with this new system were omens of troubles ahead for our tram. The Wolverton and Stony Stratford tramway stood alone and in trouble. In 1913, the General Omnibus Company started to run buses in direct competition with the tram. Fortunately for the tram, the following year Britain went to war, and with it went the buses. For Britain, it was an entirely new kind of war, in which liabilities were unlimited and commitment indefinite. During 1915, the British Army in France suffered 300,000 casualties. The government were quick to take over the carriage works at Wolverton to build ambulance trains, field ambulances, shell cases, and more. Although saved by the war, 1915 saw the tram company back in trouble. To survive, the single fare was doubled and the return fare increased by a penny. Bicycles became a popular alternative. The tram kept running. From time to time it would come off the rails. It would collide with a horse or be delayed by falling trees. But generally, neither storm, snow nor flood would stop it. Still uneconomic to run, the tram seemed doomed by neglect. Even the old Wolverton slope was causing problems.
Going along, the old tram went, it came to the hill, and when it got to just to the steepest part, or just over the steepest part, I thought I should, 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 and that's it. That's how it carried on to Wolverton, after having got out of it, and just touched in its normal way. But you could tell by the sound of it, it was really a pull going up the old Wolverton hill. It really did. It slowed up, and you wonder sometimes whether it was really going to conk out going up the hill.
At the end of the war, the metals were well worn. The tramcar bodies sagged, and the engines were dirty, smelly and smoky. In 1919, only a workman's service was running morning and night. Sir Herbert had had enough. The tram was destined to cease running. With no alternative form of workmen's transport, the railway company stepped in and rescued the line in February 1920. Plans were prepared for the refurbishment of the engines and rolling stock. Edgar Allen Engineering designed and supplied new track work, which included a spur into the carriage works. Thoroughly overhauled and renovated, the trams now carried the LNWR crest and chocolate brown with cream colours. Bagnalls of Stafford supplied a new loco to replace the No. 1 green engine. At lunchtimes, the tram would provide a unique Meals on Steel Wheels service.
About 12:10, we was just come out of school, and the tram would start off, and it would get as far as the Duke of Edinburgh public house up the Wolverton road, and there'd be about 30 women standing there with little square wicker baskets with their husband's dinner in, and they'd all wait there. The tram would draw up, and I'd pay the conductor a penny, and he'd load the baskets on with their names on, and then the workmen would meet the tram at Wolverton with their dinners, and then the men would bring them home again at night to be replenished. And you could smell the puddings and various things that were in the baskets as they were loaded up. I remember that vividly.
But that same year, the National Bus Company and a host of independent operators returned in force. Takings dropped to £30 a week. All but the workmen's trams were deserted, and the railway company was soon losing £2,000 a year. Another coat of paint in 1923 during the LMS amalgamation did little to help the profitability of the tram. By 1925, both the railway company and the county council were looking for an excuse to close the line. For a plan had been prepared to realign the road linking the two towns. The tram had to perish. The inevitable was not far up the line. The general strike of May 1926 provided the excuse. On the orders of the TUC, over 2 million workers in vital sectors of British industry, including the railways that ran the tram, downed tools from midnight on Monday, May the 3rd. Within a week, the strike had lost its heart, and by May the 12th, when the strike was abandoned, the towns had lost their tram.
Everybody who used to ride on it were very sorry when it stopped. When it came to an end, I'm sure everybody who used to ride on it was sorry that they got to go on these old smelly buses with the petrol fume and exhaust fumes coming into the buses and things like that, you know.
When it went, the character went, you see. This is the trouble. Like everything else, when everything finishes, there's been a part of the community like that.
And everybody had got a kind heart for the old tram.
And I wish now that they had the foresight to have kept one or two, or kept one engine and a coach somewhere, so that it could have been a part of the history of the community.
The tram had gone, but was far from forgotten. The Wolverton Express newspaper started a search for the remains in 1965, 40 years after the closure. Remarkably, week after week, news came in of rediscovered sections of tramcar. In October that year, attention focused on Piddington in Northamptonshire, and particularly on this house. Because in the back garden was the complete No. 4 car. It had been purchased by a bachelor, Mr. William Old, and delivered by Hollands of Stony Stratford on a low loader. Mr. Old had let his house, built a brick kitchen on the end of the tram, and used it as his home for over 20 years. Today, the lower deck houses a model railway, and the extension a workshop. Determined to save the tram remains, the Stacey Hill Collection started the recovery operation.
So far we've been able to collect 4 parts of the trams, and the only other part that's still known to exist is the No. 4, which is at Piddington and is the most complete of all the parts that are still in existence. The bottom half of No. 5 we collected from a farm at Beachhampton. The top half of No. 5 we collected from a wood at Thornton. The first half of No. 2 we collected from Lawn Farm near Oak Hill Woods, which are on the edge of Shenley Church End. And the second half of No. 2 was donated to us by Mr. Wayne of Stony Stratford. The incredible thing about the two halves is that when you put them together, you can see the saw cuts in both halves where they were originally cut in half. Now, of the problems of restoration, number 4 would be the easiest to restore because it's the most nearly complete. But this is still in private ownership and it doesn't look as if it'll be possible. So what we would like to do really at the moment is to complete the number 2 tram as an example of the size and scope of the carriages that were used. But before we can do that, we would need to first of all put the two halves in a building where it could stop for a long time, because it would take a long time to do the restoration work. And what we really want is a number of volunteers who are skilled enough to be able to complete the work necessary. We have got copies of most of the drawings, the original LNWR drawings, to enable us to do the restoration work. We could bring it back to its original form, and really all we want is money and labour.
Now Wolverton's a place with an easy, gentle pace. It's a railroad town of no great renown, but to us that's no disgrace. The summit of success is a job with LMS, with a terraced house, contented spouse, and in time 2 kids or 3, who in their turn will grow to learn to want no more than we. Suppose we try to say what really makes our day. It'd be hard to know, 'cause things always go in that same old simple way. The hooter tells us when it's time for work, and then its familiar call reminds us all that it's lunchtime, 12 till 1. One last time it blows, the whole town knows that another day is done. The work stores open wide, the workers move inside. Anyone could say, as we start our day, that we feel a quiet pride. Our work requires our skill.